If you've ever had to go to your tax assessor's website and try to get questions answered, you're talking about building a product for millions of people that don't understand how real estate taxes work. And so basic questions that need to be answered, not to mention the fact that this is a self-service platform. It's not like Sam picking up the phone and calling Ross and say, hey, walk me through this. You've got to build a platform so anybody can go to it, can get the questions and the tools that I need. And you have to do it in a logical way that anybody can understand it. That's a very real challenge.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Ross Lichtenhouse is the CEO and founder of Taxonics. They are a prop tech platform that provides real estate tax tools and information that solve real estate tax problems. He's also the co-founder and managing partner of Cavalry Real Estate Advisors. They are a boutique real estate tax consulting firm. Ross, welcome to the show.
Sam, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, the pleasure's mine. Ross, there's 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show. In 90 seconds or less, can you tell me, where did you start, where are you now, and how did you get there?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me start with this. I've spent 20 years in commercial real estate working as a property tax professional, and that's probably 20 years longer than I expected to work as a property tax professional. I got started when I moved to Washington, D.C. From the great state of Alabama. So Southern roots there, just like you, Sam, from Memphis. So I moved to Washington, D.C., went to grad school. My first job, I kind of fell backwards into property tax working for a law firm. Fast forward over that time period, kind of the following 19 years or so, joined a small regional, grew to national CPA consulting firm, built a real estate tax practice, and then eventually through an acquisition, joined a large global property tax practice, grew that as well. And then after about 5 years, decided to take a break for a bit and then went out and launched my own practice so I could build a company and a real estate firm the way that I wanted. And then, beyond that, realizing that there are some opportunities in the market to productize some of the services that we provided, decided to launch a tech platform as well. So yeah, I'm running 2 things in parallel, both in the same space, both in property tax, which again has been my career.
That's wild. So a property tax professional, What does a property tax professional do? I mean, I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, well, similar to the opening that you made. I mean, our job is to help real estate owners, investors, managers, developers understand, control, and reduce real estate taxes. And so, my career has really been focused on, and actually, let me put this out there because for folks that may be listening in, when they think of property tax, there are a number of property taxes out there. You've got personal property tax, real property tax, that falls under the umbrella of what we call state and local taxes, which are sales and use. Gross receipts. I mean, you can start throwing acronyms left and right. My focus has been on real estate tax. And so I represent real estate owners, primarily commercial. When you get a real estate assessment, if you own an office building or a shopping center, a taxing jurisdiction is going to put a value on it. And then they're going to apply generally a tax rate or a millage rate. And that's your property tax bill. My job is helping navigate that, right? What are my taxes going to be if I'm going to buy or build a property? What do I need to budget my taxes to be for a property that I operate? And then if I get a real estate assessment and I don't like that assessment because it's going to result in a higher tax bill, I'm going to hire you to help me control and reduce that. And so it's all around managing, understanding, and reducing real estate taxes.
That's absolutely wild. I think it's unfortunate we have to have an industry completely designed around keeping the tax man out of our back pocket. But that's just the way that I think.
If it was simple, I wouldn't be in this business. But it is unnecessarily complex in some cases.
It really truly is. And we've seen, certainly everyone has seen their property tax bills, especially as valuations, especially in multifamily properties, valuations have gone sky high. And so if you underwrote your 5-year plan in 2016 or 2015, in 2020, you're paying a heck of a lot more in tax, or now in 2022 versus 2017 than you were in 2022 versus 2017. So whatever that winds up being.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, Sam, because I think it's important too for folks to understand that, when you mention multifamily, those real estate taxes drop to the bottom line. So if you're an investor and you mess up and you've estimated real estate taxes over that 10-year period of your DCF, and that base year is wrong or those assumptions are wrong, you're going to eat that. You're going to eat that pain. And that's painful because you're not passing it through to the tenants. I'd say, office property owners, retail owners, they're able to pass some of those taxes or most of those taxes due to their tenants. But multifamily, if you're wrong, you're going to feel it.
That's absolutely right. And I think that's a really, it's a challenging spot to be where you say, okay, how do I estimate, maybe that's a question I have for you, is how do you underwrite and estimate where taxes will be in year 5 of your ownership? Because again, they're using these valuations based on comparable sales, I think, most of the time, where it's like, oh, hey, cool, Ross, you own the 150 unit next door to mine. And so since you sold yours for 20 million and Sam, you bought yours for 10, looks like yours is worth 20 now, Sam. So how do I, as an investor, even underwrite that?
Oh my gosh, if we had hours, days of a podcast to go through this. Let me start with this. There are 3,100 different taxing jurisdictions in the United States of America, and each one of them assesses and taxes real estate slightly differently. Right. Generally speaking, all of those assessments, when you receive your assessment, it's supposed to be based on fair market value. That is that's the start. And it trickles down into different ratios and tax rates and millage rates and taxable value versus non-taxable value. But generally speaking, the value of real estate is supposed to be based on fair market value. So your comment about, a comparable sale or a transaction-oriented environment is correct. However, for commercial real estate, generally speaking, if it's an investment real estate, it's going to be based on the income that the property generates. And so when you break it down to how am I going to forecast my real estate taxes, you're taking a look at a couple different things. One, what happens when I buy the property? Are they going to chase that sale? After they chase that sale, or after they peg it close to the sale, after the assessment following the transaction, you're really looking at an income valuation. And it almost always distills down to a very simple direct capitalization analysis. So your rents, your vacancy, your expenses, replacement reserves, capitalization rate, loaded with the tax rate, you get that direct cap value. So in terms of estimating those real estate taxes, you mentioned year 5, your best bet is say, okay, well, how does this jurisdiction treat a property that's just been acquired, right? That's going to be your year 1, right after that transaction takes place. And then down the road, you've got to understand the nuances and the methodology. And in most cases, that's going through an exercise of determining the valuation based on some income approach. That's the vast majority. But as I mentioned before, thousands of different taxing jurisdictions, understanding those nuances are important. And that's one of the things that, we've tried to productize as part of our Taxonics platform, because it is confusing for a lot of people.
It really is. And I think that the deeper you get into a market, I would think the easier it becomes to kind of project where things are, because you get to know kind of how the taxing, authorities work in that particular area. I know that certainly we've passed on deals just because of what we figured out. We hired somebody similar to yourself where he said, hey, you know what, we're looking to make this acquisition in a certain location. And they just said, look, you guys, once you acquire this is where your taxes are going. And this is not an area where they're going to be very favorable to even changing any of it. So you're about to get hosed. And actually it turned the deal upside down. We had to walk. They said, we just can't buy it.
Look, and this, Sam, real estate taxes are your single largest operating expense. Most people think of them as fixed expense. That's what I was taught when I was in business school. It is a fixed expense, meaning generally, unless your property's exempt, you got some abatement credit, that type of thing. You're going to be paying those taxes. However, it is variable in that sense, meaning it could be higher than what you think it is. And frankly, you could lower it, lower than what you think it's going to be. So there's some fluctuation there. And understanding that is absolutely critical when you're underwriting a deal.
Talk to me about Taxonics. What is the problem in the marketplace that you are solving with this platform?
Generally speaking, the industry that I work in as property tax professionals, which by the way, you will never see listed on jobs.com, monster.com, classified ads. A job doesn't even hit the radar when you're in school. That industry, interestingly enough, is really very human capital intensive. Highly paid professionals, typically working on contingency fee to appeal your assessments. In a lot of cases, highly fragmented. I'd mentioned those thousands of different taxing jurisdictions. There are probably that many firms across the country that maybe specialize in a particular locale. You've also got some global and national players. Here's the thing. There is no centralized resource for property owners. And your podcast is all about scale, right? So you're going from maybe a small property that you own in one particular jurisdiction or one particular MSA, and you're scaling larger assets, more jurisdiction. In order to kind of get a one-stop shop, meaning you're trying to kind of just sniff around, scratch the surface for some real estate tax assumptions during underwriting, there is no central location for you to go, meaning a technology, a platform for you to be able to answer those questions, a lot of the questions that we just covered a moment ago. Also, There is no self-appeal option. Generally, you're going to hire somebody like me. Those fees are expensive. In some cases, they're not accessible. And in most cases, this type of work is done on contingency. So if I'm a contingency fee-based provider, you come to me with a $5 million asset, and I'm going to charge you 20% in savings. Cavalry, my consulting company, we charge 15, which is towards the lower end of that range nationally. But the lower the asset, the lower the taxes, the lower the potential fee. And so in some cases, you've got this vast kind of silent majority of commercial property owners out there that own properties that are under $5 million that in some cases can't even get the access to a consultant that they want because the juice isn't worth the squeeze for that consultant. So Taxonics, really kind of the genesis for that was to provide a centralized platform for real estate tax information and data so people can make better decisions themselves. We want to empower the landlords, empower the owners, empower the developers to make those decisions themselves. And part of that platform for those individuals who may be scaling, who can't get the attention of a tax consultant or provider or don't know where to go, we give them a self-appeal option, meaning I give you all the tools as a professional, the platform, the evidence, the applications, the documentation, for you to analyze your property. Am I paying too much? If I am, what do I do about it? What do I say? How do I proceed? And we feed you with that information. And here's one distinction that I want to draw because this analogy or this comparison makes sense. Where Cavalry, my consulting practice, is kind of like your CPA for income tax returns. Okay, that's how the vast majority of real estate tax professionals operate. Taxonics is like your TurboTax version. Right. So as you scale, you may move from a Taxonics up to a more complicated portfolio where you need high touch, white glove service. We found a need in that particular segment of the market to give them the tools in a tech platform. And frankly, our industry as a whole is 10, 20 years behind everybody else. And so the time is right. The data's there, the tools there, the technology is available. We felt that we could productize our services and serve a segment of the commercial real estate industry better than they've been served leading up to this point.
That's really cool. I want to hear more about that. But you brought up a really interesting point that I hadn't thought about, which is that you're right. And again, this is why you built the platform. So I'm just repeating you in some regards, but it's like sub 5 million. Well, I'm reinforcing the idea, which is that sub $5 million. It's cost prohibitive for the people that own properties of that size to hire the right people to come on, and then the people that you need to hire don't want to do it either because, like you said, the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
That's exactly right. And here's an interesting statistic. Okay, there are 11 million commercial buildings in the United States, comprised of approximately 55 million real estate tax parcels. If you look at the bell curve of value associated with those 11 million buildings and 55 million tax parcels, 80% of those are slightly more actually valued at under $5 million.
Right.
And so most of the work that we've done traditionally as real estate tax consultants, we focus on the institutional folks, right? The properties that you read about in the business journal, the ones that everybody talks about in transaction newsletters. Nobody's talking about the vast kind of silent majority of individuals out there that own properties that are meaningful for them, right? But aren't necessarily being served or meaningful for folks in that kind of traditional consulting environment. And so that was the problem that we wanted to solve. That was the niche that we wanted to fill.
Right. No, that's really fascinating. I love that. What were some of the challenges, both from either a data perspective or from a user interface perspective, in building this out? Because I imagine there was a lot of variables, especially like you said, I can't remember how many taxing jurisdictions, too many.
Yeah.
You said. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, let me be clear. We have not solved for all 3,100 different taxing jurisdictions at this point. We plan on it, right? We want to be the most trusted and trafficked platform for real estate tax information tools. I mean, at that scale, like CoStar level scale, we think that we can solve for that. So that's kind of the grand vision. The biggest challenges that we have, frankly, like take the technology challenges out of it. Take the data challenges out of it. One of the biggest challenges we have with launching a business remotely in the middle of COVID, right? Aggregating the resources, aligning vision, aligning mission. So that in and of itself is a challenge, and we've overcome that challenge. And I think one day I may write a book on launching a startup in the middle of a pandemic, which, I hope it's one of those stories that was like one of the greatest businesses ever started in a downturn, started in a pandemic, right? Great story. So that challenge of starting a business in that environment was probably challenge number one. Challenge number two is because real estate taxes are so niche and because they can be so confusing, right? If you've ever had to go to your tax assessor's website and try to get questions answered, You're talking about building a product for millions of people that don't understand how real estate taxes work. And so basic questions that need to be answered, not to mention the fact that this is a self-service platform. It's not like Sam picking up the phone and calling Ross and say, hey, walk me through this. You've got to build a platform so anybody can go to it. They can walk themselves logically through the process, which is find my parcels, give me the information that's connected through our database and our platform, help me aggregate that, help me analyze my property, help me navigate it so I can get the questions and the tools that I need. And you have to do it in a logical way that anybody can understand it. That's a very real challenge. It's a real challenge to be able to build tools for folks in an investment environment that are valuing things. But man, it's another challenge altogether to take this kind of property tax geek speak and distill it down into something that people can logically move through themselves and do it without hand-holding from a consultant.
Yeah, go gosh, absolutely. Absolutely. I look forward to checking that out. Tell me, is this something that you can use on a pre-buy? I mean, is this a platform where you can go and kind of use it as a market research tool?
Yeah, so we launched our first 2 beta products here in Washington, D.C., and we're scaling to 12.5 other jurisdictions as we speak. We decided to launch with 2 products, and I spent most of the time talking about this idea of self-appeal, but we actually launched with a second product. So our first product, the self-appeal, is called Protect, obviously protect your bottom line. The second product that we built and that we launched is called Inform. And that's one that we're actually really excited about because it has an institutional investor application, but it also has application for anybody that's looking at buying a property. And that initial product tells you everything that you need to know about how a jurisdiction assesses and taxes real estate. And we've got special issue sections in there that cover new acquisitions and development. It goes over the timing, the methodology. And so if you were to buy that report, if you're looking to do a deal in Washington, D.C., everything you need to know to be able to make an informed decision, pun intended, about your deal is going to be captured in that report. And so our goal is to take all of this information that we've acquired as professional tax consultants over 20 years, distill it down with context into products so anybody, big, small, in the process of scaling can get the questions that they need answered so they don't walk into a property tax landmine. And so that product is available for DC. And again, we are quickly scaling to another 12.5 jurisdictions through more of a subscription-based model where maybe some of your listeners find out that they need to do a deal in a particular jurisdiction or find out that they need information about that jurisdiction. They can come to one place, get all the questions answered that they need to be able to make an informed real estate tax decision, and then it'll blow up their deal.
That's really cool. I look forward to that going nationwide. Tell me this, what is one challenge that is holding you back and or an obstacle you have to overcome in order to really take this nationwide? So
I think probably our biggest challenge, which we methodically planned this out, so it wasn't an unforeseen challenge. Well, there's really 2 challenges. One, because of the nuances associated with every jurisdiction, you have to build a process to gather that information and incorporate it into a product. So you have to be very methodical about building out that process of information gathering. And so it's almost this kind of like industrial engineering exercise. And so that was one big challenge when you think about scaling beyond just a couple places. The second big challenge, which we knew and which we're going through right now before our big sales initiative kicks off in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, and that is making sure that we get appropriate user feedback, which is why you go through kind of a beta test. And so when you're building something that is obviously impactful for anybody that owns real estate, you also need to get good feedback. And so you've got to be able to reach out to people and say, hey, listen, here's what we built. What do you think? Give me some ideas. And then you have to quickly iterate on that. And so I wouldn't say it's a challenge that's unique to our business because it's a challenge with any tech startup. But what is unique is that we're dealing with something that can be fairly nuanced. And so in order to get that information, that user feedback, sometimes you got to go 2 or 3 iterations deep into a conversation to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the word nuance there. That's certainly one of the things that we are up against. Ross, I'm looking forward to that product coming out, checking that out. That is certainly a need that we have in the marketplace, and I'm not seeing anything else like it, obviously, which is why you guys are putting it together.
That's right. Patented and ready to go, man. We want to be the first into the market, and we feel that we are.
That's awesome. I absolutely love it. Let's get into some more tactical questions, if you don't mind. Real quick, we'll spend a couple minutes here and then wrap up. But here's a couple questions I would have for you. What do you feel like some of the biggest mistakes property owners are making as it relates to their property taxes?
A couple of things. You want the biggest or just a couple?
Whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
It's all about
I think the biggest probably touches on what we discussed, which is proper planning. I think if you were to talk to most real estate investors and you were to talk to most real estate professionals that are in the business of acquiring or developing properties, I think they would rather plan, even if they don't like necessarily what the future holds, but at least know how to plan around it, than they would not planning well and then again walking into that tax landmine and being upside down on a property. And so I would say that's probably number one, not getting a good, accurate real estate tax forecast. The second I would say is thinking more creatively about how you can reduce real estate taxes before you buy and build. There is an absolute plethora. I mean, an endless number of real estate tax exemption, credit, and abatement programs out there. I'm talking some of the craziest stuff that you've probably ever or never heard of, and getting creative and thinking about those different opportunities where why pay tax if you don't have to? And again, it goes everything, deep down the agricultural exemption, brownfield tax credits, enterprise, empowerment zones. I mean, there are an endless number of tax credit programs that people can dig into. And so I would say that that's one area, if you're looking to really sharpen the pencil and you're really looking to boost yields and gain a competitive advantage, even through the underwriting process before you get to final bids on a property, thinking about how you can kind of sneak in there, reduce your real estate taxes, give yourself a little bit more of a competitive advantage and maybe pay a little bit more, but knowing that you're going to get it back when you save that money down the road. So I would say those two things kind of specifically are probably overlooked to some degree.
Man, that's absolutely fantastic. And and I hate to say it, but I just don't hear that much talk about it. Like when you look at all the shiny deals coming across our desk and all the projections and opportunities, like very rarely do you see something in there where they're like, hey, by the way, we're going to kick butt and take names because we've worked out a really cool rebate program on the taxes, and here's how it's going to come straight.
That's exactly right. And some of the coolest client interactions I've had of when we've been able to identify this kind of lesser known real estate tax credit, all of a sudden they go in there guns a-blazing, knowing that they're going to be paying 50% lower taxes than anybody else that's bidding because I got an ace up their sleeve. That's a really cool value to deliver.
Yeah, very, very cool. Ross, I absolutely love it. Thank you for taking the time to come on the show today. If our listeners want to get in touch with you and learn more about you and or the Taxonics platform, what is the best way to do that?
So we got a couple different ways. So you can go to taxonics.com or you can reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'm prolific on LinkedIn in terms of posting. Would love to connect with anybody that's interested. My information is pretty publicly available out there, so you guys reach out to me either through Taxonics or Cavalry. One thing I would leave you with, Sam, for your listeners, I spend a lot of time writing blogs on our Cavalry website under our consulting firm, and that's Cavalry CRE, so CAVALRYCRE.com. If you're looking for more kind of interesting, tips and tools of the trade, want to know something more about some of these nuanced things we're talking about, that blog is great. Otherwise, follow Taxonics. We got a big launch coming out here in a few weeks in the DC area. We're still in our pre-Series A fundraise. We're almost closing that out. The response has been huge. If anybody's interested in talking with us about investing in our platform, I'd love to chat with them too. But otherwise, listen, I'm a property tax nerd. I've built my career around it. If you guys ever want to talk property tax, don't hesitate to reach out. You'll always find a willing ear.
Awesome. Ross, thank you again for your time today. Certainly appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Great speaking with you.